Hey everybody, Average Picker here. So I thought I would do a little micro tutorial on overset pins because I guess I got a question about it was the giveaway challenge where you had to pick 3 locks, and I guess it was lock number 2, maybe it was the Schleg. I think it was that one. I kept saying, oh, it's overset. Overset 2, and I did a reset, and I was like, oh, it's overset, and I would do it. Basically, I was doing a lot of rapid resetting, and every time I was going, oh, I overset pin 2 or whatever it was. And I got asked about, how did I know it was overset so quickly? And so I thought we would just address that. How do you know if you've overset a pin? And there's a couple ways to tell. So let's dive in and take a look at that. So one of the first just immediate ways to tell is the lock suddenly goes dead. Meaning you're not getting anything to set, you're not finding anything binding, or maybe you're finding everything binding up, just kind of depending on what pins you're dealing with. And that'll tell you fairly quickly something's overset. It doesn't always occur though. If you really get in, and we're not going to overthink this thing any more than what I'm going to show you in a minute. But if you think about it, there are some combinations that could result in everything kind of binding up, or it's just being under spring tension. But you may get one pin to set, but you're not going to go on from there. So the lock just kind of becomes dead, and that tells you pretty quickly something is overset. Now, when I was starting out, I always found it more useful, or easier for me anyway, to check the pins by coming out of the lock as opposed to going in. Going in, I often found the pick kind of bumping up into those gaps between the pins, and it was knocking them a little too hard, I guess, and sometimes my checking could result in an overset. What I found it much easier to do was just get the pick all the way in the back, and then drag it out very lightly that direction, and searching for a gap in the pins, because if you feel that gap, that tells you most likely you've got something overset. Now, this is going to take a little bit of creative thinking on your part. What I've done is I've basically pinned this lock up in reverse. So we've got our driver pins down inside, and we've got our key pins sitting up here on the top. And realize that when this is actually in the lock correctly and under the spring tension, all these are pretty much going to be sitting even, but I just wanted you to be able to visually see what I'm talking about. So when you rake your pick across these pins, you're going to be kind of doing something like that. Now, but they're all going to be sitting even, so this is probably, we'll go between these 3 pins here. It's going to be our best example. So you're going to be able to feel that, or you should be able to feel that as it curves up over that. And then all of a sudden you're going to feel it gapped, and then your pick's going to rise up a little bit again, as long as you're being fairly gentle and you're able to detect that spring tension, and you're going to feel that gap, and that's going to tell you that you've got an overset. I've often akin it sort of to when you've lost a tooth and you kind of run your tongue along your teeth, and all of a sudden you feel that gap there. That's kind of what it's going to feel like with raking your pick across there. The other thing, we'll just go ahead and do this while we've got it here. Sometimes you do lift pins and your pick is actually like that. And if you're not really sure where you're at on the pin, or you just want to get a good feel for it, maybe you want to confirm, is that actually overset or not? Are you bumping into a pin going this way? If you're pretty low on it, pull your pick back. You should feel it make that curve, push it forward again. You should feel it curve back over it again and bump into that next pin. And that can kind of give you an idea of both where your pick is at, because you ideally want it as centered as you can on the pin for doing really good clean lifts. I mean, it's perfectly possible to lift it like that. But this can also help you determine if it's overset or not, just by how much are you running into as you go back and forth between them. Does that feel the same as what you're running into before and after it? Okay, let's see if I can do this transition well because I'm filming this out of order. So another way to tell, another way, presuming I've already done one way. Okay, so is the pin goes mushy, right? As you're starting to lift, all of a sudden you just get this little bit of mushy feel, and that's my best adjective for it. The other way, like if you've ever shimmed anything, where you use like maybe a bit of wood or anything that's getting a little bit thicker as it goes in, it slides in real easily, and then all of a sudden it mushes a bit. And that's what I mean when I say, oh, all of a sudden the pin gives you a mushy feel. And we're going to flip the camera around and I'm going to show you why that is. So let's do that. Okay, so here we have our, I think this is a Lorry. Yeah, it's our Lorry lock. And this was used. And we've got all the drivers removed. We've kept the key pins in. But we've got the number one driver, and so you're looking at the one driver and it's at rest state, and you can see where it's sitting right there at the shear line. Now this is a used lock, and what I'm expecting to see from this lock when I pull this out is we should see a line right at the shear line. Now if you think about what has happened to this lock over however many years it was actually used as a lock, somebody came up, they put their key in, and they turned. And you don't always put your key in perfectly straight. Sometimes you've already got a little bit of an angle, running as you put your key in. And so what you've basically done though is it's gradually ground away at that driver or any part of the pin that interacts with the shear line. What we should find is a noticeable line. So let's get that pulled out. And there we go. Oh, this was a good one. I really probably should have checked these before. So we can see here, you can see that little line right there. I know it's a little bit grainy because I'm quite zoomed in and my camera does not enjoy this view that much, but you should be able to see that line. And you can also probably tell that it's actually a little bit uneven. Oh, look at that. Look at that grind mark. That's probably from me picking at it over and over and over again. But yeah, so this pin will have gradually, over its years, as it got used, it jiggled around, and depending on which way it was getting turned, left or right, it kind of got hit by that shear line over and over and over again. And you can see how just uneven it is? Because it would have had to have been hitting, on one side or this side of the core as it was turned, right? So this direction, it's not going to pick up really any wear and tear. I shouldn't say any, but not very much. This way it's going to pick up wear and tear. And we see that perfectly reflected in the pin. But now if you think about that, years of use, that has taken off minuscule amounts of that pin, right? So, and we should, if I pick this lock enough, we might be able to see if I've ever overset pin 1. Not necessarily though, because it can also be the key riding up and down there. Yeah, so you can see. So we've got that bit there. Where is our key? So as that key has gone in and out of there, this is our first pin, right? So we're sitting up in here, quite high. It has, sometimes this key pin will have also traveled up past that shear line and then dropped back down when it hit its appropriate spot. And you can see that. But what that's done is that has essentially taken away just a little bit of material. So when I say the pin goes mushy, if you think about that as a shim, what you've got is either by just some dirt or from material having been taken off. This part is just ever so narrower than like the top of the pin, or here you can see on the bottom of the driver. And that's going to almost act as a shim. So as you start lifting, it's going to feel very smooth. And then all of a sudden you're going to hit this part and it's just not going to feel the same. It's going to feel mushy. It's going to feel like you're pushing something into a hole that's just a little too big to go in there. Not by very much, but by just a little bit. And that's the mushiness that I'm talking about, and that's why it's occurring. It's just all that wear and tear on the pin itself up and down through that shear line over the years. And while I have them out, these are in no particular shear line orientation way, I just dumped them. But you can see that line again appearing. You can see it right across there. We don't have it quite as defined on this one, but you can still see in 3 where it's ridden up and down through there again with pin 4. And our pin 5 is much more difficult to see. Let's see if I can bring it up here. There we go. But you can see where that line is right there. So this is our part that would have been interacting the most with the shear line. So yeah, hopefully that helps a little bit. You know, what are you looking for? Are you all of a sudden feeling a big gap when you're moving back and forth across the pins? That can tell you that you've got something potentially overset. Is the lock going dead? Meaning, are you not being able to find anything binding? Is everything seeming to bind? What the lock is, you're not getting any changes from whatever it is. You just picked a pin and now all of a sudden nothing seems to be working for you. That tells you probably got something overset. And our third one is during the actual lift itself, it's all of a sudden going a little bit mushy. It's feeling like you're forcing something that's just a tiny bit too big into that shear line. And so that's probably the 3 most immediate things I can think of as far as how to determine if you've got something overset. And that mushy one for me at least is kind of, that's when I'm like, okay, I'm starting to overset it, and I just let the tension go and go from there. On challenge locks, just a little side note here, challenge locks, you can tend to sort of pick through some oversets sometimes just because the pins are so weird. You could hit something that'll drop that pin. But on a standard lock, you know, a lot of times I'm like, you know what, I'm going to be able to get through this thing no matter what. And it's easier and quicker just to do a reset on the whole entire lock as opposed to trying to drop one individual pin and then go back and make sure that's what I've done. So that's why you'll sometimes see me doing rapid resets. So yeah, there we go. I hope that's been useful for somebody, and we'll be back with some lock picking probably today. Got some errands to do. You guys have a good one.